I was in Vietnam, the same as China, the tax department shut us down. And the police were really nasty. They'd want money, I think, but we wouldn't ever give them money. And the Americans, you don't know anything. VC, Viet Cong, right? They all kind of copy us. They copy the design, which was really crazy. They would say it was the fake chiropractic battle. You can break all the laws, all the rules. It's really hard. You're never quite legal no matter what you do. I was always living under a certain amount of fear because there was always these problems coming. But Vietnamese, they're very emotional. Vietnam is probably the hardest place to retire because America's not bad, but it's also not that compelling. I suppose the things I really don't like about Vietnam are the people would just scream and honk and bang on your, they had so much anger and it was a nightmare. The government is not perfect, but Vietnamese are very unrisk adverse. If you ever get into a situation where it's confrontational, you better just walk away because...
So how would you feel if you sold everything in the United States and moved all the way across the world to Asia? That sounds insane, right? Well, our guest today did exactly that, and his story is nothing short of extraordinary. Today, we're delving into the life of a man who swapped the American dream for a new beginning in Vietnam. We're gonna talk about his failures, his triumphs, his successes, and the many game-changing decisions that made it all possible. So let's get started. Hello, my name is Ken Duong, international business immigration attorney with over 15 years of experience helping individuals live, retire, invest, and do business here in Vietnam. And today I'm going to interview somebody that lives what we call the Vietnam dream as opposed to the American dream. And I'm excited to talk to him today. So join me right here. So I'm here in Thao Dinh in District 2 at Bakes Thao Dinh. So I'm going to go interview one of the most interesting people that I know here in Vietnam. Hello.
Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning. Nice to see you.
Good to see you. I'm super excited.
Me too.
To have you on our channel and also to interview you and learn about your life.
Thank you.
So please, grab a seat. So how are you feeling this morning?
Feeling good.
Good?
Yeah, really good actually.
Well, I'm super excited to have you. I waited a long time. We've been friends for a while and I'm glad to be able to talk to you and share your amazing story. And we said it's nothing short of extraordinary here in Vietnam. So first of all, our audience and the story and the reason why I want to interview you is because of your backstory. So could you tell us a little bit more about how you came to leave all that behind in the US and move to Asia and then of course to Vietnam?
Okay, so I had been to Asia before I went to chiropractic school. I've been to Korea and China and Tibet for other reasons, both study and also for adventure. When I started my practice in America, I really hated practicing healthcare in America, mostly because of insurance, but also because of the idea of malpractice. And I felt like I had to work for my money twice. Do my treatment on the patient, give them everything I had, and then I'd build the insurance company, and they'd want more documentation. And some people were really good at that. They made a lot of money. For me, it drove me insane. When I had a chance to leave, I sold my practice and left.
Okay. And then after you left, where did you go?
I had written a book and the book was doing well. So I took 1 year off and I drove around the United States in a Volkswagen van and did a book signing tour for the publishing company. At the end of that, I drove to the airport and gave my dad the keys to the van and bought a one-way ticket to Japan.
Wow. But you're still not in Vietnam. What you do in Japan?
Japan, I'd been given a professorship at a chiropractic university, but they closed the university just before I arrived. So then I went to Taiwan and Singapore and ended up ended up in Malaysia. And I started the first really successful chiropractic clinics in Malaysia.
So Japan closed down, then?
Yeah, about 4 weeks after I'd left America, I ended up in Malaysia. And I started working for a Chinese company out of Hong Kong there. And they were bloody awful. They would bring doctors over on one contract and give them something else. And they were very hated in the region, but I didn't know that. So I stayed with them for about a year, and then I quit and I opened my own clinic in Malaysia, and that clinic became really successful. But I really didn't love living in Malaysia, and I wanted to take some time off and climb mountains. I had an opportunity to sell the company, and so I did.
How long did you spend in Malaysia doing that?
Approximately 3.5 years, and I got married during that time. I married a Chinese Malaysian woman.
So you left Malaysia behind, but you brought something with you.
That's right, yeah.
And then did you end up in Vietnam after that, or?
No, I took 2 years off, and I wanted to write a book about northern Burma, and I wanted to climb the highest mountain in northern Burma. Actually, the second highest mountain. The highest mountain had already been climbed. And so I took a couple of years off, and I trained very hard. I made the first ascent of Pungsan Razi in Burma. And then after that, I spent about a year writing a book about that experience and some other experiences and doing some other kind of freelance photography and stuff. And went to Mount Everest with a North Face photographer, did a lot of mountaineering and rock climbing. And then when I ended up, I was in Thailand. My wife and I moved to Thailand, and we were rock climbing in Krabi, Thailand. And at that time, we decided to have a baby. We got pregnant. And then it had been about two and a half years after we quit working. And I decided I wanted to go back to work again. So we moved back to Malaysia and bought an apartment there. And then I moved to Hong Kong and started working for a chiropractor in Hong Kong, preparing to open a clinic up in Shanghai, China.
Okay.
And my wife's Malaysian Chinese. We both speak Chinese, although I don't speak very well. And so China seemed like a great opportunity. It actually was. I spent 1 full year in Hong Kong, and I found a really good investor, a great business partner, a guy with a lot of integrity. And I went to Shanghai a couple of times. I would just wake up in the morning, I didn't feel happy. I'd say, man, I could feel we were going to do well. I could feel we were going to be very successful. But I felt miserable. Every time I went to Shanghai, I just felt like it was too big. I didn't love China. I loved Taiwan, but I didn't love the Chinese culture. There was an oppression there that I didn't like. During that time, there was a woman named Jocelyn Tran. You probably know her. She was in AmCham. And she came to Hong Kong, and she met me, and she says, Dr. Wade, you should look at Vietnam. I go, isn't Vietnam the same as China? She goes, no, Vietnam's different. You'll like Vietnam. And so I met another guy named Mr. Thaw. He owns the company Thin Loam. And he also told me, he goes, Dr. Wade, you should come to Vietnam. China sucks. And I says, but isn't it the same as China? It's like a similar country. He goes, no, I'm Chinese. He goes, I'm Chinese Vietnamese. You'll like Vietnam, trust me.
Yeah. So he gave you a real comparison between the two countries.
So I bought a ticket to Vietnam. Got a visa.
So many of our Americans who decide to move to Vietnam, I mean, you moved almost 20 years ago. But back then, what's the reason why you relocated out of the US and then went to Asia?
I guess for a couple of reasons, I was fundamentally unhappy living in America. And for one thing, as a doctor in America, a big part of your practice is the business of billing and collecting money. And the insurance industry was really tired of doctors overbilling, and so they made it very hard to collect money. And so you had this really adversarial relationship to try to get money when you were doing healthcare. And the other thing was, I felt in America there were a lot of doctors already. Like there was a lot of competition for patients. I felt if I was there or not there, it didn't make a lot of difference to other people that much. They could always find a good doctor. And I felt I was pretty good. I was trying to be really good at what I did. But I felt like whether I was there or not, it didn't really change anybody's life. I felt if I came to Asia and I was the first in my industry in a country, I could actually make a difference that people would feel, that would actually be real.
Yeah, get that first mover advantage.
Yeah.
So before you moved to Vietnam, what was your expectation? What did you think about Vietnam and what were your first impressions?
I knew nothing. When I was going to chiropractic school, I was dating a Vietnamese woman, and we were both going to school. I taught anatomy and physiology. I did dissections. This is in San Jose, California. During that time, I had an impression of Vietnamese culture, but what I didn't know was I had an impression of Viet Q culture. The Vietnamese culture here and the Vietnamese in America would be, would say, as different as British are from Americans. You know, they speak the same language, they kind of eat similar foods and stuff, but there's quite a lot of difference in general.
Yeah.
And so my girlfriend was Catholic, and we'd go to the Catholic church and we'd take Laotian boat people and teach them English and stuff like that. So when I came to Vietnam, I thought I knew a lot about Vietnamese culture. And when I got here, very quickly I could see that I didn't understand it very well at all. And in fact, many of my Viet Q friends that came back later had the same experience. They go, oh, we thought we knew Vietnam and we're Vietnamese, you know.
The language is one thing. The culture then, the pre-75 culture versus the pre-95, đổi mới culture, compared to what it is now in the last 10 years, I consider modern Vietnam.
Yeah.
Right? What were some of the maybe culture shock that you had or first impressions that were totally opposite then and maybe now?
So I was living in Hong Kong when I came to Vietnam. And I remember the first impression I had was I got out of the airplane. I got out of the airport in Sun Bay, Tan Son Nhat. There was a friend coming to pick me up. And I remember just looking out and the sea of humanity, and they seemed so animated, so alive. And I'd been going back and forth to China quite a bit. And I'd get out the airport in China, and everybody be standing there with a sign, you know, with this kind of blank look on their face. And the Vietnamese, I could see this animation in them that was very different. And that was, I had this like feeling of energy. I liked the place. It was hot, it was humid, it was gray skied, everything that I don't think I'd like, you know. But in reality, I just felt really happy the moment I got out of the airplane. I felt like there was this animation.
And after 20 years living here, do you still feel that energy? Do you still feel that excitement? Has it fizzled a little bit?
No, it hasn't changed.
Okay.
Yeah, it's I still feel pretty much the same emotion towards Vietnam as I always did. I feel I understand Vietnam better. I feel that I understand kind of more the different kinds of Vietnamese people, how they're different in the Mekong Delta, how they're different in the middle of Vietnam, how they're different in Hanoi, and how people in different economical stratas have different strategies. And I can really see the difference between, say, Chinese Vietnamese and Người Kinh. You know, they look really similar, but their life strategies and their culture is quite a lot different.
Right. And there's really a segregation within District 5 and then folks of the Kinh as well.
So I understand that 80% of you are not subscribed to Kin's channel yet. I would really encourage you to subscribe. It helps with the algorithm and it helps Kin to produce this amazing stuff that's so valuable for all of us. As I said before, I would love to have had this type of content when I first came to Vietnam. It would have helped me tremendously. And even now I'm finding his YouTube channels to be incredibly useful. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. Thank you very much.
Well, as you know, it's very important. The audience always asks, what does it cost to invest here? You know, 20 years ago versus now, and then also the trajectory of your business, because I know that your business back then was extremely unique, and even now, it's a highly regulated industry, chiropractic. So if you can let us know what was your initial investment in Vietnam, sure. And then I know you had a great exit, and maybe you can talk about that as well.
So initially, we decided when my wife and I talked to risk, we figured the investment was a risk because we didn't know we'd be able to get going. There was no legal framework for chiropractic in Vietnam. And from the little bit we could find out, it was very difficult to open any kind of medical center, like a dental center or even a hospital or even a clinic was really difficult to open. And so initially I talked to a guy named Bob Banderman at the American Embassy. And I said, how long will this take? And he said, probably a year. And he said, so he gave me this advice, and it was really good advice, which was my own idea. He says, why don't you block a certain amount of time and a certain amount of money, and don't think too much until the time and the money are gone, and then reevaluate. He said, otherwise, you'll keep wondering, you'll see this money go out, and months will go by. And so we put $100,000 in HSBC Bank, okay. And we blocked 1 year, 12 months. Yep. And my wife and I agreed that we wouldn't really discuss quitting until 1 year or $100,000 are used up. And I think we used up about $68,000 on lawyers' fees and living expenses. Living not much because we moved to Binh Thon district and lived in a tiny little Vietnamese house in Pham Bit Chan Street. Yeah. And I think we're paying $600 a month rent. And
so I'm calculating that's only $5,000. You paid an attorney $63,000?
No, not that much. We paid in other fees as well. You know, we paid attorney fees, we paid submission fees. I joined AmCham. You know, just yeah, it was the legal fees were pretty high.
So in those 20 years, right? You started off $100,000. You allocated about 68. You didn't use it all.
Yeah.
Tell me what happened during that the time. Well, ups and downs, challenges that you encountered. No, not just in that year, but. Maybe you break it down into 5 years or 7 years. What were some of the challenges that you had in Vietnam?
Well, we reached 12 months and we didn't have our licenses yet. And my wife just turned to me one day. She just says, let's just go home. Let's leave. Let's go. I says, well, and so I went to Lam Vu Thao and I said, we're just going to go. And he says, oh, he says, don't do that. He took me out and he sat me down for lunch. He goes, let me just fly to Hanoi and ask him one more time. And the investment license came through. And so I go, man, we should have had an ultimatum a long time ago. This is pre-WTO.
Right.
We opened up.
What year was this exactly?
2005, I think.
2005.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Or 2007.
Something like that. Yep. Yeah. And so anyway, we
true pioneer. Yeah, very first.
Yeah.
So you got your license.
Maybe it was 2006. I'm trying to remember for sure. I'm not too good at time frames, but yeah, we got our license. We got a small CBR. Richard Ellis got us a place in the guy that was before Pete Townsend, Richard. Who's the guy that runs it now? CBR Richard Ellis.
Townsend? Mark Townsend.
Mark Townsend, yeah. Mark Townsend. Yeah, the guy before him. I can't remember the guy's name, but he got us a really nice little place on in District 3, right on the border of District 1, on Trung Dinh Street, and we built out a very small clinic there. And we were open for about 24 hours, then tax department shut us down. And I had a tax holiday, so they came in and they did this big audit and shut us down. Turned out that when we'd applied for our license, our lawyer had used one of his family residents to, because you have to have a place of residency, and we'd never changed that. And so the tax department kept sending these warning notes, and nothing had happened. So they finally located us. They shut us down for about a day or two, and then they found out we don't owe any taxes anyway, and they just let go. And then about a week into it, the police came and shut us down. And the police were really nasty for a little while. They'd come in and they'd just shut us down. They'd want to see all our documents. And finally, I got the American Embassy to intervene. And that was a long story, but we got that stopped after about 6 months. Fire department gave us a lot of trouble. Department of Health started out really good, and then about a year and a half into it, they started giving us a lot of trouble. They would change, there'd be certain people in the Department of Health, and they'd be real good, and then it would change to somebody else. And they'd be really nasty. They'd want money, I think, but we wouldn't ever give them money, and so.
And then the name that you started off, is it what it was now, or did you start off with a different name?
We started with the ACC, but we applied for, so they said, what are you going to call it? We're going to call it the Vietnam Chiropractic Company, VC Clinic. And so the government says, well, you can't do that. The Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Investment Planning said, well, we don't accept that name. I go, why not? And they go, oh, you Americans, you don't know anything. VC, Viet Cong, right? And so I go, what should we call it? They go, call it the American Clinic. Call it ACC, American Chiropractic Clinics. I go, but don't you hate Americans? They says, no, why would we hate Americans? I go, well, the war? They go, no. You hate the Japanese? I go, no, we don't hate the Japanese. They go, well, they bombed Pearl Harbor. You guys kicked their ass, now you're friends. You guys attacked us. We had a big civil war, and you guys were a big part of it. We won, now we're friends. It's old history. Literally, that's what came through in the translation, almost word for word. And I was like, wow, that was not what I was expecting at all. And in fact, in all my time in Vietnam, I've had almost zero animosity because of the war, which I was really surprised about. You'd think there'd be a lot of anger and stuff because of what happened, but surprisingly, they're really over it.
Good. Very, very glad to hear that there's no animosity. And then now as well, I think the U.S.-Vietnam has the greatest relationship, both fiscal and also social environment, and our comprehensive strategic partnership agreement, right? But I definitely know in the environment 2005 all the way up to 2010 to 15, you didn't have the best environment here in Vietnam. Tell us some of the ACC challenges that you went through.
One of the biggest challenges was people copying us. So like ACC opened, and 6 months later, ACC2 opened. It was another clinic. It was not owned by us. It was owned by a dentist. She hired some physiotherapists to do something sort of like what we were doing. And then she posted a kind of a chubby little mafia guy in front of our clinic to tell the Vietnamese that, like, we have two centers. This center is for the foreigners, and the Vietnamese have to go to that center. And so we had to solve that problem. And it took us about 4 or 5 months to, get her to take the sign down. And it was really nasty, And I think there's been 11 ACCs open besides ours. And then everybody thought CC is really important. So there's been PCCs and CCCs and 3Cs and LCC, and they all kind of copy us. They copy the design. Most of them wouldn't use chiropractors, which was really crazy. They would say, we're a chiropractic clinic, but they'd get a Dr. Duong or something like that, And it was the fake chiropractic battles.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. A lot of times you're fighting battles that in the U.S. for better business practices, you don't have to fight. Right. Okay, so a lot of the trademark infringements, a lot of fraudulent cases.
Yeah, tremendous amount. Even now, we have foreigners who call themselves chiropractors, haven't been to chiropractic school, and go on YouTube and learn how to crack bones and stuff. And somehow in Vietnam is long-term. If you can break all the laws and all the rules for quite a while and get away with it, eventually it'll get you. But when you try to do everything exactly right, it's really hard. You're never quite legal no matter what you do. And it's a strange, there's paradoxes in Vietnam, and that's one of them.
And then how about from the investor relations side? You start off with your 100,000. Did you sell shares? Did you raise more funds during your endeavors?
Our company was pretty successful from the second year onward, and we always had plenty of money. However, after about 7 years into it, my wife was really tired of running it. It was just her and I running it. She did all the accounting, she did all the HR and everything, and we had a couple other doctors working for us, and she wanted to quit and I wanted to expand. So we began to look for partners, and we did sell equity, but we didn't need to do that. We sold equity because it was nice to take kind of a chunk of money out for safety and then to try to expand the business,
And I mean, how many investors did you bring in? And were you looking at strategic investors, or were you just looking for limited partners with capital to assist you?
Capital was never an issue. Actually, what we were looking for was somebody who could help us to navigate Vietnam. The hardest thing in Vietnam was not making money. We were making plenty of money, and we had money to expand, no problem. what we were looking to do was to have somebody who could help us navigate the business environment in Vietnam. I found it incredibly, better word, frightening. I was always living under a certain amount of fear because there was always these problems coming up that they seemed like they were existential problems. They were going to kill you. And there was always a solution. There was about 4 a year, the police would shut you down. DOH would decide to suspend your license. Something would happen and or some really important, somebody would start a company just like yours and try to kill you, And this kind of ongoing stress, I felt that I wanted somebody who was Vietnamese, who could protect what we were doing and could give us advice and could help navigate through that. I began to interview people, like I interviewed Don Lum, from Vina Capital. I interviewed Brian Peltz, who'd helped start VNG. And I interviewed about Bang Trin. He started the Ironman. And what happened was I eventually interviewed Lê Hồng Mun, who was my very close friend. And I remember Mun saying, yeah, Dr. Wade, you know what your chances are of success with a partner? And I go, what? He goes, somewhere around 3 to 5%. So that's about the success rate. He goes, but you needed someone like Brian and me. Brian and I, he says, Brian and I met, we built VMG. We, he exited. We're still friends. You need somebody like that, he said. But he says, people like that are rare. But he says, I would find somebody who's already had a good relationship with a foreigner, a Vietnamese partner. He says, I'll help you find one. And a few weeks later, he called me up and sat me down. He said, I'll do it. He says, I don't need the money, of course, he's really successful, right? He says, I'll do it because he says, I think what you're doing is good. I think Vietnam needs it. I think it's a good opportunity and I'd like to see you stay. And so he became my business partner. And he brought in one more. He brought in Keen Nguyen. Keen Nguyen was an investment banker. And so then it became the three of us as investors.
So you have the operational expertise, you have the government relations, and you had the financial wherewithal.
Yeah.
Right? So it's really a great combination. Even though you were already very successful, it's just maybe having the right partners to structure organizationally to expand much faster and safer.
Yeah.
Right? And more secure.
At least feeling safer.
Yeah. Okay. So did you not feel safe even after having those strong partners come in?
We still had huge problems, but I always felt that no matter what happened, I always felt that Mun and Keen could solve it. So we did have big problems come, and they would usually give advice until we reached a point where we couldn't solve our own, and they would step in and help us solve it. But I tell you, it was very worth it having that kind of peace of mind, knowing that I had somebody of Mun's caliber to step in and help or to intervene when we needed it. I don't think I would have survived without someone like that, being who I am. I'm not really...
Well, that's definitely a testament to your business when you have to reject Don Lam.
No, I didn't.
You interviewed him, but you didn't let him invest.
No. I never interviewed him to let him invest. I asked Don Lum for advice. I don't think we were ever big enough to even be part of Vina Capital.
After you went through the hard times, after you got your strategic partners, I know you had a very successful exit or partial exit. If you can tell us a little bit more
I'm
about
fully
that.
exited, yeah.
Oh, you're fully exited?
Yeah.
So if you can please tell us, for many of the businesses, exiting is considered success.
Yeah.
Right? Not closing down, not filing bankruptcy, not leaving the business. A good exit. If you can share with our audience a little bit about your exit, how it came about, who was it with, and information that you can share, and what year.
We had 4 clinics by that time. We had a huge clinic, like a 2,500 square meter clinic in Hanoi, 7-story building. We had a clinic in Da Nang, and we had 2 clinics here. We had one in District 1, which is about 2,400 square meters, and we had a littler one over in District 5. And cash flow was real good. It was really doing well. Mun and I got to talking, and Mun says, why don't you just keep it and let it keep going? And I says, I don't know that I want to keep putting up with the problems. Because every year we'd have 3 or 4 pretty bad problems. I said, I think I want to see if we can sell it, but I may want to still work there.
Okay.
So Keen Nguyen, who was our other kind of silent partner, Keen got to talking to some people. He talked to Quadreus, who was the main investor in FV Hospital. They'd expected FV to buy a lot of other companies underneath FV, and FV hadn't been able to do that because each time FV would investigate a clinic or a company, they'd find a lot of problems,
right.
Usually with, like bookkeeping and stuff like that. And so they hadn't bought anything else. They were supposed to buy a number of companies under them. So they asked FV if they would investigate and consider buying us. We weren't very huge, but we were squeaky clean. We'd been, I think PricewaterhouseCoopers had audited us for 5 years in a row, and Mun insists on really stable accounting and business practices. So we were super clean, and they came in and looked at us, and they agreed to buy us. That was it. I was very uninvolved in the exit process. We had a Chinese woman, a Malaysian woman working for us who was a banker, and she understood all the terminology, and she and them, they worked through the whole thing, and I just kind of worked as a doctor and did business as usual.
Okay, great, great. And so for you, having built it from the start, right, at the beginning of the business until the exit, so we're looking about 2005 until
2006, I think, is when we finally got open, yeah.
Until 2018 when FV acquired. And then after that, you worked for a period of time.
Still am, yeah. So they required me to work for another year and a half. They wanted me to work for 2 full years. And at that time, I was planning on going back to America to live. So I just wanted to leave completely and go back to America. And that was our and we bought a beautiful piece of land up in a canyon in Utah. But as we got closer to actually finishing, I realized that I actually really like working as a doctor, and I wasn't really ready to quit completely. And so FB asked me if I'd like to stay on a very part-time contract, you know. And so I agreed to do that.
So with that history of coming to Vietnam and having that successful exit, in your mind, do you feel that you exited properly and you were able to do up until that point what you wanted to do in Vietnam?
Okay, that's a good question, because I actually, when I came to Vietnam, I didn't really have an objective except just to build a successful business and make enough money for retirement. And you know, I was looking at maybe 10 years. I said, well, we'll work 10 years and move on to somewhere else. I'd never done anything more than 2 or 3 years of my entire life before that. So yeah, I think I far more than exceeded my expectations as far as how much time I spent, how much experience I had, and then how much money I ended up with at the end. So I think that everything, on every front, I did better than I expected. And made a lot of mistakes. We could have done a lot better too, you know. However, if timing had been different, like with COVID, we could have done a lot worse as well.
True, true. A little year or two later, looking for businesses or looking for investors might be a little bit tougher or exits. Part of doing business in the country is understanding the culture.
Right.
And you having lived Japan, Korea, Hong Kong as part of China and traveled a lot to China, doing business in Malaysia and then here in Vietnam. Can you just share some of the cultural differences that you recognize and then its impact on your business style or your leadership style?
So when I came to Vietnam, I asked a woman from Hanoi, I go, are Vietnamese more like Thai people, because I'd worked in Thailand, or are they more like Chinese? And she goes, we're more like Vietnamese. Which is a good answer. And I suppose we would compare the Vietnamese most closely to Chinese. And you know, a lot of like Tet holidays, the way they practice Buddhism, a lot of things, the linguistic similarities. There's a lot of similarities from Vietnam and China. But there's a lot of huge differences as well. The huge difference is that Vietnamese are, they're communal even before communism. They're very communal people, they're very agglutinative. And if a Chinese, like when I was in Malaysia, if a Chinese person was working for me and they weren't happy, they would just shut up and keep working. Or if they were not very enthusiastic about doing, they just keep working. If we were really treat them well, they'd be okay and happy. They were very modulated. Vietnamese, they either were really with us. From day one, you know, we hired a bunch of people from Mekong Delta and real young girls and guys that had never worked for anybody before, and they were so excited to be part of us. They were just, and as long as we kept that up, we'd get 130% out of them. The moment one of them didn't feel like they were part of the group, they'd freak out and quit, even if they didn't have another job to go to. So the Vietnamese are very hyperpolar compared to Chinese. Chinese, if I had a problem in Malaysia, if I got everybody in a group and tried to talk about it, nobody talked, they just sit there and keep their mouth shut. And in Vietnam, if we had a problem, we'd get everybody into a room and sit down and just let people start, and the people start talking. And after a while, we'd get the whole issue out and people would talk it out. That's one huge difference between Vietnamese and Chinese. And also the Japanese, the same thing. Japanese won't talk things out very well. Koreans are somewhere in the middle, you know. I lived in Korea for a while and I speak Korean, and Koreans are very structured in how they solve problems and how they talk and how they organize. But Vietnamese, they're very emotional. They're very honest.
Yeah, because I know a lot of your videos, you are speaking in Vietnamese, and I'm sure you do it in other languages as well. How has the ability to speak Vietnamese helped you understand the Vietnamese culture and also successfully do business in Vietnam? And is it necessary? Did you feel it's necessary?
I'll let you know when I speak good enough Vietnamese for it to help me.
You've done videos. I've seen you do videos.
I really struggle with Vietnamese. I assumed I could learn Vietnamese by listening to it, and it wasn't true. So that was one of the big mistakes I made, was not studying it from day one. During COVID, I did a real intensive Vietnamese course, one-on-one teacher, 5 or 6 hours a day for many months, and I finally kind of got to the level where I could have a conversation. It makes a huge difference in Vietnam if you can say anything. If you can say, Xin chào, em quay com, you know, you're already a hero. You know, You get a lot of credit for very little performance. As far as understanding the culture, I don't speak well enough to really be able to understand the culture better through the language, but it definitely helps the rapport. You know, like it really helps. Like if when the patient comes and they sit down, I go, "Hi, auntie, how are you? Where's your pain? How long have you had that?" They feel really happy and they start to get better even before we treat them. You know, so I think it's really helpful in that respect.
But do you think it's necessary to speak Vietnamese, read or write, to open a successful business in Vietnam?
Well, you and I both know many people who don't speak any Vietnamese who are multimillionaires in Vietnam, so of course it's not necessary. I think as a personal preference, I think a person can function through translators fine. I would love to speak Vietnamese perfectly. I love it when I sit down with somebody in the Mekong Delta and I can talk to them. Necessary, no. Yeah, especially now with Google Translate.
Then having a great English speakers. So amongst the youth population now, the university graduates from all schools, they speak English very well.
Very well now.
And that's what I always try to tell our clients who come in. You can get a personal assistant, executive assistant to help you with the translation, with interpreting, and still be able to effectively do business here. And it shows. We have a lot of foreigners that are doing business in Vietnam.
Yeah, I think it's very unessential, but it's very nice. I mean, the Vietnamese very much appreciate any effort that direction.
What would you say is kind of like the biggest mistake that you made here in Vietnam?
Oh, by far, the biggest mistake I made in Vietnam was not to start studying Vietnamese from day one. I had learned, it's the 9th language I've tried to learn. And somebody told me, I had a friend who was American, a great Vietnamese speaker, and he goes, do 2 months of pronunciation and tones, and then start studying the grammar. I'm not gonna do 2 months of pronunciation and tones. He goes, do 2 months, a couple hours a day of pronunciation and tones. And during COVID, I did about 130 hours of pronunciation and tones, trying to unlearn all my bad pronunciation problems, you know.
Okay.
But yeah, that's if I had to do over again, I would have started from day one studying Vietnamese.
Pronunciation and tone.
And then and learning the language, because it's been really difficult compared to other languages.
So the one thing, the fact that you speak Vietnamese, but you look white.
Right.
Like you look like a white guy. So are there scenarios or situations whereby you're speaking to them in English and then all of a sudden you bust out your Vietnamese, and how did they react?
So a lot of times they don't even realize I'm speaking Vietnamese. And now it's getting better because I kind of know how to make that kind of introduction. Sometimes they're pretty excited. You know, Vietnamese are really excited and happy if a foreigner tries to speak their language. And so they'll go, yeah, huh? You know, sometimes I get into an elevator, you know, and I'll look around and I'll say, tất cả là người Việt, phải không? Yeah, chúng tôi là người Việt Nam. Oh, mừng quá. You know, and then they'll, whoo, you know, and get pretty excited.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Do you know how to cuss in Vietnamese too?
Huh? I don't. I haven't learned how to cuss in Vietnamese.
Okay, maybe that's something you can learn, because cursing is a sign of intelligence.
Really?
Yes.
I must not be very intelligent.
So there's a lot of cursing. You're gonna learn how to cuss. It's not today because our channel is PG.
PG, yeah.
But when we're in the mountains and we're riding, I'll teach you a few of those words.
Interestingly, in the Vietnamese language, the word for crazy is maman. It's a very bad word. Maman is crazy in a bad way. In Chinese, it's go slowly. So when I first came to Vietnam, every time I run out of Vietnamese language, Chinese would pop out. And I'd go, you know, tang maman. And they'd be like, they look at me like, oh, you just, and I'd say, what? You know? And it took me a long time to get over using, because chum chum is in Vietnamese to go slowly, and cha cha in Thai, and yukari in Japanese, you know. And so, like, as I'd have different patients come in, I kind of learned how to use, you know, basic instruction in many different languages. And sometimes I would use a Chinese word that in Vietnamese it meant something entirely different. That was an example of that.
Yeah. And then they laugh and they have
fun. Vietnamese, it's interesting. So Chinese people are very risk adverse. And they won't confront. They won't fight physically if they can help it. And Vietnamese are very unrisk adverse. Vietnamese are their honor is really important. So it's almost impossible to insult a Vietnamese person in good nature.
Okay.
And I tease Vietnamese and tease them, you know, like I get in an elevator and says, oh man, you guys are Vietnamese, yeah. You're also small. I says, you guys are really small. And they'll look at me and they'll go, you're small, but you're cute. You know, "Dễ thương, nhỏ nhưng mà dễ thương." And they'll all just laugh. And in America, they'd probably kill you, you know. And
they got a lot of good comebacks, and they understand the humor.
Yeah, but you're tall, you know. They say, is it proportional? They'll say, is everything big like you, you know? And they'll have ways of joking, you know, little innuendos and stuff. And but if a Chinese person, if you have like trouble with them, and you start getting really angry, they'll usually back down because they don't like confrontation. Like in Malaysia, like the taxi driver might be really nasty, and you fight with him, they back down. In Vietnam, if you ever get into a situation where it's confrontational, you better just walk away because they'll die before they back down. Like if they start getting angry, you say, okay, I'm just going to go away and come back when you're having a better day because it's not worth it, you know?
Yeah, they'll really stand
And
back.
that's a really interesting polarity. It's very different than China. It's very different. Thailand's more like that as well, though. Thailand, if they smile, everything's going to be okay. If they don't smile, might as well not try anymore.
So a big part of our fans or subscribers, they really want to know comparing different lifestyles. Especially they have a question, if I'm going to move or retire, live in Southeast Asia, and you having lived there between Malaysia, Vietnam, and Thailand, can you give us a few comparisons about maybe some cultural differences?
So I would say that the cultural differences, I think Thailand is probably the #1 retirement destination because it's inexpensive and it's very, very friendly for retirement. Vietnam is probably the hardest place to retire because of the visa requirements and things like that. But culturally, Vietnam is the best country to me. It's very transparent and a certain kind of person just loves Vietnam. Malaysia is probably the best value for money. Malaysia has the Malaysia My Second Home program. It's very easy to retire there. Everybody speaks English. Everything's cheap. But culturally, Malaysia has a lot of interracial conflict and a lot of kind of animosity. That bothered me a lot, and I didn't really like living there for that reason. But so I think that for me, Vietnam is my favorite place. It's also not the easiest place, and Thailand's probably #2.
Okay, and then Malaysia #3.
Malaysia, I don't go back there too much anymore. I still have a home there. I have a home in Thailand. I try to go to Thailand 1 or 2 months a year.
But the question we always get is, as an American, now you're calling Vietnam and Thailand home, where is America in your heart as an American living here in Southeast Asia?
So that's changed. Originally, I planned to retire and live when I first came to Vietnam, I planned to retire, live half a year in America during the summer, and the wintertime I'd live in Thailand. Now we went back to build our home, and actually I didn't really want to live there. America's not bad, but it's also not that compelling.
What are some of the main factors that made you decide that Vietnam would be the primary, Thailand secondary, and then maybe the US? Is it cost? Is it lifestyle?
No, it's 100% interest. Yeah, well, we have a real good community here, and we have a beautiful community in Thailand as well. But you work as hard as you do to succeed in a country like this. Once you've succeeded here and built these friendships up and learned about the culture, you have a love for the culture you don't want to give up, And when I feel like leaving Vietnam, I feel very sad. And so when I'm here, I feel quite happy and peaceful most of the time. I guess that's why. Da Nang is amazing. I mean, the local government there has been so good for so long, in my opinion. And I spent a lot of time in Da Nang. I had a clinic there, so I spent months at a time there. I never didn't love living in Da Nang.
And then, of course, you had Hoi An, the UNESCO ancient town and all that history. Then, of course, you got Banana Hills.
Banana Hills, Way.
You have everything.
Bicycling, you got swimming, you got rock climbing. Not too good yet. They need to develop that. That's the next thing that needs to happen there. They don't have much rock climbing yet, but
well, definitely that's something that we're gonna do in the future. What is the most enjoyable thing, or some of the enjoyable things that you do daily or monthly here in Vietnam?
It's more simple things. So one, I just really enjoy hanging out with Vietnamese people. When I love getting on a motorcycle and going up in the mountains and just stopping at villages and talking to people and see what they're doing. I find it fascinating even now.
Because I know you take blocks away, like 3-4 days or a week, and you just kind of ride your bike and...
Yeah, I kind of like unstructured adventure, I suppose. So I do a lot of trips into the highlands, and I go to North Vietnam from time to time and do big motorcycle trips through there.
Yeah, Ha Giang Loop.
Ha Giang Loop and areas that are less known than that.
And I think at your age, which I feel you're super young still, you're extremely active. Because we have a lot of our friends, we play tennis, we play golf, but we're not riding our bikes and climbing mountains and going to the jungles like you. What is so enjoyable about that? And how are you sustaining that lifestyle?
So now, since I sold my business, I have a lot of time. And so basically, I've slowed down a lot. I don't exercise nearly as hard as I did when I was younger. Even when I was 50, I was training a lot harder than I do now. I just eat well, try not to drink too much, and then exercise moderately. That's about it.
Nice. So you feel your lifestyle and you have everything you need. How about the food? So, I guess environments that you have here in Ho Chi Minh or other parts of Vietnam?
I think food-wise, it's like a paradise. Okay. When I go back to Idaho, people are like, you live in Vietnam now, what do you eat? I go, if I told you, you wouldn't believe me. I bet it's grim. They have no idea. Yeah, you can get everything in Vietnam. You can get any kind of food you'd want. You can get, the restaurants are moderately priced. I mean, French, Germans, unlimited Korean and Japanese, of course Vietnamese,
Austrian, you got Egyptian food here,
Egyptian,
Turkish,
Lebanese, any kind of food you want. And the restaurants are really inexpensive compared to, say, America or Europe, you know.
So
Sometimes
you do have everything you need here to sustain your happy lifestyle.
I think anybody would, yeah. I think the only thing that's missing is nature. You know, Ho Chi Minh is a long ways away from beautiful, clean nature. That's you know, that's any big city, I suppose. But I guess if I have one complaint about Ho Chi Minh, it would be that it's kind of hot, humid, and polluted. But you know, that's almost any big city in Southeast Asia.
Yeah, pretty much.
And it's flat. You know, there's no mountains. And in spite of it, I love it. You know, that's a strange thing because I would never have imagined that I would stay in a city this long that's so far away from mountains and so far away from nature. Vietnam seems exotic to somebody like me. You know, it just seems like something out of a dream when you first come here. Right? Asia's like that, and for a lot of people, the novelty wears off real quick. For me, it never did.
Amazing. Almost 20 years now
Yeah.
that you've been here. What are some of the other daily challenges in Vietnam that you can share with our audience?
I suppose the things I really don't like about Vietnam are the increasing traffic, and that happens with prosperity. When I first came to Vietnam, it was a lot of Vespas, and they didn't have a helmet law. So you had all these beautiful girls, the Ao Yai, sitting side saddle on these Vespas, riding with their hair flowing in the wind, and tons of motorcycles going this way, and motorcycles going this way, and bicycles, and a few cars. I loved it then. Now it's starting to get traffic and traffic jams and honking. People are still pretty good. They're not too impolite, but they're getting less tolerant, you know, get a little more angry.
Yeah.
And,
A little bit more road rage you can see
Yeah.
happening as well.
I hit Malaysia during the height of the road rage. I mean, people would just scream and honk and bang on your, you know, they had so much anger because they were just gridlocked all the time, and it was hot, and you know their road system was really complicated, and they were always just locked up. And when I got to Vietnam, it was like everybody's on Valley, and they just kind of float along, and there was no real rules. You just, if somebody's a little bit ahead of you, let them go. If you're a little bit ahead of them, they let you go. And now we're starting to lose that a little bit. They're still pretty good.
Yeah.
Still not
And then
bad.
of course the Bangkok traffic is
Yeah.
notorious around the world as well. The KL, the Bangkok, and then relative to those two cities, I think Ho Chi Minh's flow
Still really
is still moving.
I hope they keep it that way, yeah. I hope they're able to build infrastructure in such a way that it continues. I know they had planned to make these satellite cities like Phu My Hung and Celadon City, and then build, you know, feeder roads out to them and try to keep it from becoming too congested. But then, of course, they built all these other places right in Ho Chi Minh, which they weren't really supposed to.
to get closer, and it's very similar to Bangkok.
Yeah, I was in Bangkok in the early years, and it was a nightmare. So I would always make sure that where I lived and where I worked was either really close together, or when they got the SkyTrain going, I was near a SkyTrain terminal and I worked near a SkyTrain terminal. But then now Bangkok has gotten, you know, a great subway system done, and their SkyTrain is really a lot more complete. And so Bangkok, as long as you can stay somewhere near public transport and you can work somewhere near public transport, it's a pretty good life. But if you get out in the suburbs, it can be a nightmare.
Right. Do you think Ho Chi Minh's going in the direction of Bangkok now with the new metro line, and will people just live near the metro?
Yeah, we've been waiting for that for a long time. When that comes out, we'll see. I think that it'll make the properties that are further out into Duong, you know, these properties are near the metro, they'll go up a lot in value because people can live way out there and they can come into work without having to drive. Yeah, I think it'll help a lot. It's just been taking them they've had a lot of delay on that, I guess.
Over 10 years.
Could write probably a few books about that.
Yeah. And then still not finished the book. And then of course extension of the lines. But yet I, just like you, probably very hopeful. We've been here long enough, and the fact that in our lifetime that there is a metro system is pretty dang successful for Vietnam.
I think so, and I think Vietnam's going to do really well. Every country we look at, you know, there's dangers they're having and problems they're having, and then there's successes. You have the problems that happen in the Philippines. All this stuff is happening in Malaysia, Thailand. China is a big uncertainty. But I think if you put everything together, I think Vietnam has a lot of ability. Everything is stacked up right for it to do really well. You know, I think that Vietnam's economy, the workforce is big enough. They're ambitious, energetic. You got a lot of really smart people. The government is not perfect, but what government is? I think their government is better than Chinese government in a lot of ways. You know, so I think that they got a chance to do great.
That's a perfect segue for us to talk about Vietnam's future and your future within and without Vietnam, and some of your plans for the future as well. So we'll get to that right away.
Okay.
So, I mean, thank you so much for sharing about, you know, your past and your history of coming to Vietnam, also the present right now, but also very important is about the future. So I want to ask you about kind of your general idea about the future or the trajectory of Vietnam from your perspective. And then I'm going to ask you about your personal goals and also about your business goals as well, along with the charitable work that you do.
Okay.
So what do you think what's going to happen from now, 2024, and moving forward in the future of Vietnam?
So I think, of course, we can't know the future of anything, but I think compared to all the other Southeast Asian countries and Central Asia and China, I think Vietnam is one of the very best countries. It has one of the very best possible futures. You know, the government is really trying to do the right thing for the people. You have a pretty large workforce that really knows how to work. Transfer technology is coming in very well. So I believe that Vietnam will continue to progress and will progress favorably against other countries, you know, like China, Thailand, you know, some of these other ones.
Great, great. So I mean, you see yourself continuing to live there. So what are some of your personal goals first, and then we'll get to some of your business goals and exciting projects you're working on.
So personally, I would really like to somehow take all the experience I've had in healthcare and be able to come up with a way to impart that to other people so that they can be happier and healthier while they live as an expatriate. I always see people come here, there's a lot of things they could do just slightly different, and they could be a lot healthier, a lot happier, a lot more peaceful. And so I'm thinking about doing a YouTube channel to do that. Okay. And also to tell people really interesting things about Vietnam that you'd never expect, you know. And so that's kind of personally what I'm thinking about doing.
What is the premises? Are you going to be traveling around? Are you going to be riding on your bike? Are you going to doing helicopters? I mean, well, what is the premise?
All of it. So right now
we're like Tom Cruise of Mission Impossible.
So what we're doing now is, with a real close friend of mine, we go out to really remote areas and just try to find something really interesting. Like we don't have a structure to what we're looking for. Mm-hmm. We say, okay, we're going to go out and see how they make incense, and then we videotape all that. And we find out a whole bunch of things we never knew before. And we just went up to Dak Lak, and we found this guy from Hanoi who had relocated to Dak Lak at 53 and started his own fish farm. Okay. And we knew nothing about him. We just drove out in the country and saw the fish farm, went over, and it was a remarkable story. I mean, I couldn't tell you the whole thing here, but we videotaped him and did some drone shots of his fish farm. And so what the plan is, we'll come back and we'll put those together into episodes, and eventually, you know, hopefully that'll, you know, somebody can find out something they never expected. I'd also like to delve into like the natural healthcare in Vietnam, like acupuncture, Vietnamese medicine, like Chinese medicine. There's a lot of different things there, and I'd like to go and interview people and do little things on that, you know, and show people what's available. I'd like to also do like healthcare, like Vietnam would be a great destination for medical tourism for certain things, skin, dentistry. You know, Thailand's very famous for that. Vietnam, cosmetic surgery, yeah. And so I'm going to do a segment next week on my dentist. I have this dentist I love, Elite Dental. I just love them. And so they're inexpensive. They do a great job. So I'm going to go and do a YouTube video about them. Okay. And I'll do one about, there's another center I'm doing some treatment for a knee problem I had that I couldn't treat my own center. And so I think things like that for expatriates, also just really interesting, you know, things that people just don't know about Vietnam. Vietnam has so many layers, you know.
Wow, no, that's very interesting. You're going to be both doing a lot of stuff in the big cities, but you also be doing the countryside as well. Yeah. And then I know you do rock climbing. So you do surfing?
Never tried it. I've never tried surfing. I've never tried golf.
Okay. Well, a lot of the water sports as well. I think one of the beauty of Vietnam is you have all the natural beauty all along the coast, along the mountains, and so much, many of those cities like Da Nang has it all. I mean, I'm definitely supportive of your YouTube video, and if I have something that I have questions about that maybe you can do a video, or if ever...
Yeah, maybe I'll
get a chance to interview me someday.
I'd love that.
Especially in the Mekong Delta. So I work with a lot of seafood companies for a long time in the Mekong Delta, and I learned how to raise shrimp. You know, we talk about the mangrove forest. Maybe we can even swim in there with the shrimp and the crab.
That sounds interesting.
Right? And of course, our USAID also has a program to protect the desalination in the mangroves. That'll be something interesting. Yeah. Right? So we highlight some of those and a little bit of adventure in life.
For sure.
Or else it'd be a little bit too boring. Yeah. Okay, so that's some of your personal goals, getting that YouTube channel. I look forward to being a subscriber. Many of our audience will as well. Yeah. And then on the business goals, I know you have quite a few projects as well. Now that you're retired from ACC, What are some of your business goals?
So I've worked with children and foot issues for many, many years, and I learned exactly how to correct children's feet using foot orthotics and specialized shoes. The problem is it's extremely expensive. It costs about $400 per year per child, and so my business partner Mun charged me with coming up with a way to do something that would reach out to the masses for the children that have this flat foot problem in Vietnam and Southeast Asia. And so we've invented a technology that we patented that we can put the foot onto this orthotic and we can electrify it, and it can, or we can use hot air, one or the other, and it can mold directly to the foot and be, approximate the correction of these ones we're making with this Swiss CAD/CAM equipment. Yeah. And so I'm working with a company called Beatus. They're a Vietnamese company, wonderful shoe company, and so we're very like-minded, and so I'm having a lot of fun doing that. And I'm working with them also to improve their running shoe. They have the Beatus Hunter Runner. It's a really good shoe, but it not quite as good as say like Hoka or some of these other like name brand Nikes. And so we worked with this shoe to try to improve it, and at the same time keep it at a price point that the mass number of people who want to exercise can afford it. And so that's two projects we're doing. One other one is we're looking at a project to improve the health of factory workers. And so I've been spending the last couple of years reading a lot on kind of the 80-20 principle of improving people's health. And generally you need to improve their mental health, you need to improve their fitness, and you need to improve their diet. And most factory workers look forward to slowly developing diabetes, heart disease, sometimes cancer, and they have a lot of fear about that. And so I'm working on a program that would be not so difficult to do and not very expensive, but would have a tremendous impact on the health of people working in factories and people who are working in places where they're not paid a lot. And so I've been working actually with, talking a lot with the people at Beatus to do that because they're willing to pioneer it. And also my former partner with VNG, I've talked to them a lot about it, and hopefully we'll come with something that could really make a difference.
So as we continue, I think one thing that you've done here a lot and that you plan to do in the future is some of the charitable work that you've done, and then in the future as well. We'd love to hear that. When
we first came to Vietnam, when I was in Malaysia, I opened up a couple of clinics right in cerebral palsy hospitals, and so we worked to find out how much conservative care could add to surgical care for cerebral palsy patients to have improvement, because it's a lifelong issue, And when I came to Vietnam, we partnered with 3 cerebral palsy centers, and we would go in those centers and treat the children. Eventually, we partnered with a cerebral palsy orphanage out in the Duong area, and we worked with British International Schools, PGA, to bring about 30 kids in to treat in our clinic. And we've done that kind of ongoing up until now. I think that they discontinued for a while during the sale, but I think they've just reinstated it again. So we have the cerebral palsy children come in once or twice a week, and the chiropractic care really helps them. Beyond that, we've gone out to these places and helped them to upgrade their treatment protocols, help them to buy equipment and stuff like that in the past 15 years.
So I mean, if I can really summarize kind of the whole interview and being able to get to know you a little bit better and showing to our audiences, you're this American guy who just left America. You came to Asian countries. You did a lot of work in those countries. Then you came in your longest stint here in Vietnam, now almost going on 20 years. You've succeeded, you've failed, you've had hard times, but at the end of the day, you're doing amazing charity work here. You're helping the people. You're enjoying your life. You have personal fulfillment, societal fulfillment, economic fulfillment. So I think you really encompass what it is to be what we call hạnh phúc.
Hạnh phúc, yeah, happy.
Happy, right? You're happy with what you've done, and you're happy doing what you're doing now. And I think that's really the message that we want to give, especially in light of the current times now. We're not in the best economy in the world right now, nor the times. We just went through COVID. But to have your story and to be able to share with our audience of someone who is hạnh phúc or who's happy in his current state, and you'll continue that because you already found it, right? We're always trying to find what is hạnh phúc, what is happiness.
Yeah, I think that 20 years in Vietnam, for all of us, any of us, you and me and the friends we have, would be equivalent to an entire lifetime. You get here, you don't speak the language, you don't know how to get around, you're like a little baby. And then you kind of go through an adolescence, you go through an exciting time where you really just get enamored with how exciting and vibrant Ho Chi Minh is and nightlife and everything. And then you get middle-aged. Now I'm 60. And I'm sort of middle-aged in Vietnam as well. You know, I'm settled here. I'm happy. I kind of know what the score is. I just enjoy a day-by-day life. You know, it's normal now.
But you're not going through a midlife crisis. You're going through more of an exploration of this new stage, as someone who's 60 but still young at heart, still very healthy, and from the things that you're talking about your future, you have so much going on, and I think that's what keeps us exciting, and I hope that you continue to have that happiness or hạnh phúc that we call it.
Me too.
So I've had a great time interviewing you. Love to shake your hand.
Thank you.
I've known you as a person, I've known you as a business person, and now I get a chance to interview you and then show your success story, both as a man, as a businessman, and then also as a person in general living here in Vietnam. I guess on behalf, as a Vietnamese person, on behalf of Vietnamese people, you know, thank you so much for coming into this country and doing what you've done. And then also as a channel, YouTube channel, I want to say thank you for sharing with our audience everything you've done. And I love to hear their story. I've heard it a few times, but I think there's so much more. And you're such a deep person, such an intelligent and also energetic person. And I think that's what Vietnam needs, especially right now. So I really appreciate that, you sharing with me and our audience. But is there anything else you want to say?
Yeah, I would like to say I really appreciate you doing this channel. I would have loved to have had something like what you're doing now. When I came to Vietnam, there was very little information. And I think what you're doing is so valuable because people can find out, you know, they can see different examples of people who, you know, different people's reaction to Vietnam, because it's not easy here. And I think what you're doing is really valuable. You know, I went through several of your interviews with different businessmen. I go, man, if I'd have been able to see those before I started, it would have made all the difference. So also really appreciate what you're doing. I'm going to go back and look at quite a lot of your videos now that I'm more exposed to them.
Thank you very much. I think the feeling of respect and camaraderie, and as both professionals who are trying to do something that we don't naturally train to do, which is being content creators. And I wish you the best of luck in your video, and I'm very sure that our audience will love to hear your story. And I promise we will paint you in a great light with humor and some movie magic.
Okay, sounds great.
So it doesn't just look like two old guys talking to each other.
One old guy.
Well, I'm getting there. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ken. Appreciate
for your
it.
time.